Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're tackling a profound, deeply universal, yet kind of completely unspoken topic. And that's the act of grieving the person we used to be. It's something almost all of us experience at various points, yet we rarely have the vocabulary to actually talk about it. So today, we're going to explore exactly why we build these sort of metaphorical altars to the versions of ourselves that literally no longer exist. Plus, we'll look at the data and philosophy showing why honoring that past is actually an absolutely crucial, healthy part of who we are becoming. So have you ever mourned the person you used to be? It's a heavy question, right? Take a second and really think about it. Because there is a very particular type of grief that comes with this feeling. And honestly, the hardest part of it, there is absolutely no public ritual for it. I mean, when we lose a loved one, there's a funeral, there are flowers, there's a socially sanctioned period of mourning where everyone around you just gets that you're hurting. But when you lose a version of yourself, maybe the self you were before life fundamentally changed you, or the self you were entirely certain you were going to become, there's no ceremony, no time off work, there is just this quiet, invisible ache that you kind of just carry around with you. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the physical, tangible evidence of that invisible ache. The artifacts we keep. You know exactly what I'm talking about, those journals from when you were 23, filled with wild ambitions, or photographs of a hopeful face that still believed certain things about the world. Even those half-finished projects of someone who just hadn't yet learned how much time and energy things could cost. And the thing is, we don't hold on to these items out of simple, fleeting nostalgia. We hold on to them with a deep, almost sacred reverence. We keep them because we recognize that something very real and very vibrant existed there. We hold on to them because that person, that past you, deserves to be remembered. Moving right along to Section 1, the science of lost selves and why this grief is neurologically real. Now, while this emotional ache feels incredibly intimate and subjective, modern psychology is actually beginning to explore it in depth. We can ground this feeling in some hard psychological science, because what you're feeling isn't just in your imagination. It all centers around a concept known as self-continuity. Essentially, this is our psychological sense of remaining the exact same person across time. It's the mental thread connecting you at age 10 to you at age 30. And researchers are digging deep into this because they've realized that when there are massive disruptions to this continuity, when some event dramatically severs who you are now from who you were then, it causes immense, profound internal shifts. Your brain literally takes this disruption very seriously. So the crucial point is this: mourning a former self activates the exact same neural pathways as the death of a loved one. Isn't that mind-blowing? When researchers study people experiencing a major disruption and self-continuity, they find genuine, measurable loss. This isn't just poetry, and it's not some dramatic metaphor for feeling a little sad about getting older or changing careers. No, it is a genuine, neurologically real loss occurring right there in your brain. Your mind literally processes the end of your former self the way it processes a physical death. So yeah, that grief, it's incredibly legitimate. Which brings us to Section 2, mourning closed doors and the true cost of growth. Okay, so if the grief is this real neurologically, what exactly are we missing when we look back? Well, acknowledging the loss means acknowledging a pretty tough truth. Growth inevitably comes with a painful price tag. Because what we're actually missing isn't just a specific year or a wrinkle-free face in the mirror. No, we are missing a self that held unclosed doors and infinite possibilities. We mourn the self that existed before a specific hurt, before that sudden betrayal, or a terrifying medical diagnosis, or a crushing failure. We miss the grace and the lightness of naivety. And that past self wasn't necessarily foolish, but they possessed a lightness of being that you would probably give a whole lot to feel again, even just for a single afternoon. You aren't just missing the past, you're mourning the specific lightness you carried before life truly happened to you. Consider this brilliant adaptation of an ancient idea. You cannot step into the same river twice, said Heraclitus. But he said nothing about the ache of standing on the bank, watching the water that carried you downstream, wondering if you could swim back to the shallows. Let that sink in for a second. The author of our source text brilliantly expands on the ancient Greek philosopher here. I mean, Heraclitus told us that life is constant change, which is absolutely true. But this edition perfectly captures that specific, deeply human ache. It's that helpless feeling of watching the current of time and experience just carry you away, while you longingly look back at the shallows where you used to safely stand. All right, Section 3, the myth of moving on and challenging the cruelty of letting go. We really need to talk about how society handles this, because there's this pervasive narrative out there that looking back is inherently bad. We're constantly told to just move on, let go, and look forward, right? And this brilliantly illustrates a harsh conflict. On one side, we have the societal demand, this expectation that we surgically remove our own history in the name of progress. It's frankly a cruel demand. It asks us to shed who we were without a second thought, as if those past versions of us were just mistakes to be erased. On the other side, though, we have moving with integrity. This is refusing to pretend the past didn't happen. It's the honest acknowledgement that growth has a real cost, and that what was lost absolutely deserves to be named and recognized before it can truly be released. Mourning the past is not a regression, folks, and it is certainly not a refusal to grow.
And that takes us to Section 4, Building the Altar, where past and present coexist.
So, if surgically removing our history is harmful, how do we actually move forward with integrity? Well, we do it by building a metaphorical altar. It's a deeply uplifting, healthy, and necessary mental space where we can honestly honor what was. There are 3 distinct stages to how this mental altar actually functions. First, we acknowledge the loss without being trapped in it. You don't have to live in the past to respect it. Second, we honor our past versions not as failures or naive mistakes, but as vital, beautiful stages of a becoming that is still in progress. They lived fully in their moment. And third, we allow the past and the present to coexist without confusion. In so many global traditions, an altar is exactly this, a sacred place where the dead are neither forgotten nor confused with the living. It's a structured, healthy space where what was can be fully honored without insisting that it still is. Let's move to and see how this builds into an incredibly empowering realization. You do not become unrecognizable to yourself. You become more fully what you always were. Sure, you're stripped of the softening layers that protection provides, but the core remains. When you think back to your former self, you might feel miles and miles away from them, but the truth is, the things that changed you were actually already present in them as untapped potentials, as quiet fears, and as the specific tenderness that made those painful losses possible in the first place. You are a continuation, not a replacement. So, I want to leave you with a provocative question to wrap up today's explainer. If your past self could see you now, would they recognize the road you've traveled? Seriously, think about whether they'd feel proud of your resilience, or maybe a little frightened of the hardships, or simply incredibly relieved that you survived the immense distance between them and here. The altar you keep in your mind is a conversation between who you were and who you are. It's not a monument to being stuck. It's a glorious record of your incredible road. Every version of yourself that you mourn is profound evidence of how far you have traveled through very real weather. So take a moment today, light the metaphorical candle, because your past and the beautiful person you used to be truly deserves its ceremony. Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you next time.